throne speech, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau committed to legalizing, regulating, and restricting access to marijuana. Today on Context, politics and pot. Canada is poised to legalize marijuana, and Canadians are some of the highest consumers of cannabis in the world. So today we decided to do something different. Before we stepped into the studio, we conducted a little poll. Sheldon Neal, what have we found?
Thank you so much, Lorna. That is right. We asked our studio audience, those right here, to take part in an anonymous poll. We asked them two questions. Have you ever or do you currently partake in the smoking of the devil's lettuce or the marijuana? Now, the results are 64% have smoked. 25% are currently smoking, not in the audience now, but currently smoke. And last, both of these numbers are above the Canadian average. Lorna.
I'm almost speechless, Sheldon. How can our studio audience, we did not set this up.
We did not. Check their pockets right now. Check their pockets right now. Check their pockets.
All right, well, we've got a great guest to help us handle this. Brian O'Day is an expert in marijuana use in Canada. He's been a guest here before. Brian worked for 20 years as a marijuana trafficker. He employed 120 people in drug trafficking before he was jailed for 10 years for bringing 75 tons of marijuana into the United States. He's a keen advocate for legalization. Please welcome to Context, Brian O'Day. Hi, Brian. Good to have you here. Just keeps surprising you when you come to Context, doesn't it?
You do keep surprising me, and you have all the big guns here today. I'm kind of worried.
Okay, Brian, what do you think of the Liberal government's plans to legalize marijuana?
I think they're good. I think it's about time. This has been a law that has been on the books since the 30s, and it was created based in a lie. It was created over pulp and paper and land holdings, actually. This was a plant that was not illegal until this happened, and they made it illegal right then and there.
Because profits could be at stake.
Because profits were at stake. And so the process then became pulp and paper.
Because this is not the History Channel, I gotta change this tone here.
Yes.
If this is illegal in Canada, why did you walk in here with all of this and you brought it to me today like a little present? I can't believe this. I can hardly...
Look at this.
This is the closest I've ever been to this. If this is illegal, where are you getting this in Canada?
All of this.
Just like this?
Just like this, okay? When you
Brownies,
asked me to come down here,
foils,
right, these are edibles. These are for people
banana
who...
loaf.
And, you know,
beauty cream.
That's right. Well, skin cream.
All marijuana-based, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Okay, so there are only 37,000 people legally able, licensed to take medical marijuana in Canada.
Is that correct? I didn't know
It's
that.
not a big number.
No, it isn't.
And they say in 10 years it will be 400,000 people. And this show is not going to be about medical marijuana because I understand that it is pain reduction. But I just think it's appalling that you can go shopping for this variety of goods of an illegal substance in Canada and just walk into a public building.
But no, the Canadian government has licensed I don't know, 13 major growing operations who sell this very product.
Yes, to do it under a license. But
that's right.
Okay, so how did you get this? Where do you...
All this came from a dispensary that is operating under the gray part of the law, okay? My problem with it is this. There are thousands of moms and pops in this country who are making a living and who stood on the front line of this ridiculous law for a long time and put their lives at risk in doing so, their freedom at risk in doing so.
To be a medical dispenser.
To be medical dispensers. And there are lots of them in this country. And I am afraid with the legalization that's coming down now, that all these moms and pops who've paid such a huge price to stay on the front line and help all of these people are going to be hustled out the door as corporate Canada comes in and takes this over.
Well, and the Canadian Mental Health and Addiction is advocating only the government should be able to distribute. As a former dealer yourself, you saw the dark side of the law.
I did. I want to see it distributed to adults who are being treated like adults. And so, you know, I think that probably the safest for the recreational market, I don't want this medicinal market to disappear, because if it disappears, all the mom and pops are gone. But for the recreational distribution now, which is about to happen in this country, it's probably going to happen through the LCBOs, through the liquor boards, simply because they have an infrastructure in place.
Okay, Brian, just stay tight on these opinions,
Yes.
because we are gonna go to Ottawa now to hear from two lawyers and researchers who've been heavily into these issues. Eugene Oscapella has been researching and writing about drug legislation for 20 years, and Andre Schutten is a legal consultant at the Association for Reformed Political Action. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us there in Ottawa. Eugene, we polled our audience for their current drug use. When you poll your students, what are you finding about marijuana use?
Well, I teach a third-year course in criminology at the University of Ottawa, and I've done surveys for over a period of about 15 years almost, and so they're anonymous surveys. And generally, I find that between 60 and 85% of my students have tried marijuana at some point, and generally around 50 to 60% have used it within the last year. So they would qualify as what we call current users. Now, that's much higher than the national average, and sort of begs the question, if we really want to stop marijuana use, we should probably ban university. But
Okay, Andre, let's go to you, because you are trying to keep up with the idea of saying, hey, there should be some limits on this. What are your concerns, Andre?
To go to full legalization, I think, sets up a bit of a dichotomy, an option of one or the other, either full decriminalization or maintaining the status quo. And I think there's a third option, and that is that we change the current approach of the law as it relates to marijuana use, but that we still, with the law, send the message that the use of marijuana is detrimental to personal health and also to societal health.
Based on what do you say that?
Well, just one example. I think there's multiple examples, but the Lancet 2012 released a study, a comprehensive review of the medical research and literature on the effects of THC, which is a byproduct of smoking marijuana, on the brain and its long-term effects on mental health. And there's definitely a link, a correlation between smoking marijuana and mental health.
Do I seem
issues.
mentally defective in any way to you?
Brian, I could name you 5 young people in my life right now that would totally fit that picture that Andre just gave.
That's probably a possibility. I could name you, 200 young people that have an alcohol problem. So do we not distribute alcohol to adults? If this is about legalizing marijuana for adults, I am not your child's parent. And it's up to parents to be parents.
While we've got the lawyers with us, Eugene, tell me your thoughts then on what you expect to see in that legislation.
well, I agree with Andre that way. I mean, I think we need some intelligent education about cannabis. Cannabis can be harmful to some people. We know that. As alcohol can be harmful, as many substances can be harmful. It's all a question of education and getting people to understand the consequences of their actions. The problem with some of the measures that some people have been advocating over the years, for example, decriminalization, you create this fantastically lucrative black market that causes carnage around the world, and we haven't seen it stop the use of cannabis. Cannabis use is still very widespread. So I think, if we look at the tobacco example, with tobacco, 50 years ago, half the adult population smoked. All the while, we've kept this drug legal, but we've intelligently regulated it. We've had good public education about it. So rates of consumption are much, much lower than they were 50 years ago. And amongst young people, are even lower than they are amongst adults. So we can have some intelligent policies that limit use of the drug without criminalizing them.
How do you legalize and not approve it? And let's go to you, Andre, on that.
By legalizing it, like, law plays many roles, and one of those roles that the law plays is teacher. And so when our law says that something's legal, that means that sends a signal that it's okay, that it's no problem. And so I think that when we completely legalize it, it's sending a message, our government is sending a message that consuming cannabis, smoking marijuana is no worse for you, no different than having a drink or smoking a cigarette.
Well,
and I think that the medical evidence that is out there suggests that smoking marijuana is actually quite different altogether, and actually much worse for you, both as an individual and for society.
That is the most absurd statement I have ever heard anybody make about that product.
Well, Eugene, I want to take it to this place now. Who should have the right to distribute this? It's coming.
Well, and we have to distinguish between distribution and production. I think you want fairly strict controls on distribution, and I like the model of, I mean, the LCBO was one model initially when we bring this online, because they have an existing infrastructure, they do have rules, and I think it's not a bad model. And as a matter of fact, the LCBO was the institution that was created after alcohol prohibition ended in 1927. The LCBO in Ontario was created to distribute alcohol, and they had a fairly strict regimen that was relaxed over the years. But I don't think that's a bad model to look at initially as the distributor. Now, who's going to produce it? It would be licensed producers, in the same way that you have to be licensed to produce alcohol for commercial distribution in this country.
And there's over 500,000 Canadians have a criminal record because they've had sometimes as small as a joint on them. Should they be pardoned? They're going to be asking for pardons.
Absolutely. I certainly hope it will happen, because, look, to my students, the greatest disability my students face if they smoke marijuana is not the potential harmful effects. And there are some in some cases, as there are with many other substances. But the greatest harm they face is getting a criminal record, which can impair their ability to earn a living, to travel, to go abroad. I mean, that's the real impediment. And we can legalize it and regulate it strictly without encouraging it, as we've done with tobacco. We've discouraged tobacco use, all while keeping it legal. But we don't need to criminalize people, because that imposes a terrible disability on young people.
Andre, I'm curious, how do we be citizen activists on this so that it has enough freedom, but yet enough protection in it as well?
Right. Well, I would actually agree with a point that Brian made a little earlier, and that is that the government is not the parents of my children, and certainly not the parents of anyone else's children. And I think that, you know, as a citizen activist, the organization I work for, we're very, very big on the independence of the institution of family. And I think that's where this whole issue, where the bulk of the work on this issue needs to be.
Look, I have 4 children, and 3 of them have done drugs, and 1 of them hasn't. 3 of them have drank, and 1 of them hasn't, and they're all adults. And why is that? It's because of the way they were raised. You see, my first 3 children suffered my insanity when I was a cocaine addict, and I was just basically out of control. My youngest son, however, has only known me to be a sober person, and he's never had a drink, and he's never had a smoke.
And it's not only the standards you give them, it's also the, you know, the stresses that they face in their lives, because you know, people use drugs for a reason. For most people with cannabis, it's youthful experimentation. Sometimes it's a way of using forbidden fruit when it's prohibited. It's you know, it's a bit like a no trespass sign. The first thing you want to do is hop the fence past the no trespass sign. But people do use drugs for a reason, and we, you know, by just telling them not to use the drugs, we really miss an opportunity to look at, you know, what are the issues that they're facing that make them want to use the drugs? Is it stress? Is it mental illness? We know that that's a factor in much problematic drug use. And sometimes we do a disservice to young people by just blaming the problem on the drugs, and instead of looking at the underlying causes.
That is what the next part of this program is going to be about. Andre Schutten and Eugene Oscapella, both of you lawyers researching this in Ottawa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Sheldon, over to you.
Legalization, decriminalization, or none of the above? How do you think cannabis should be handled in Canada? Call, write, or email us right here at Context. We want to hear from you.
Coming up next, we'll talk to an addiction specialist and hear a story of healing and redemption.
Welcome back. Well, today we are talking politics and pot, and we have some fast facts for you. Here we go. Cannabis use is down in Canadian high schools. Now, 23% of Canadian high school students smoke pot. Now, that's down from around 27% in 2005. But around 60,000 Canadians are still arrested for possession each year, and 500,000 Canadians have criminal records for the same offense. Now, the estimated cost of marijuana-related prosecution in Canada, well, that's $500 million annually. Turning to Colorado now, where cannabis was legalized in 2012. Marijuana-related traffic deaths are up 32%. Colorado teenagers now rank number 3 in the United States for marijuana use. Now that's 56% higher than the national average. And finally now, college-age Coloradans now rank number 2 in the nation for marijuana use, and that's 54% higher than the national average.
To help us figure this all out, we want to now go to the director of Quinton Warner House in London, Mr. John Diaktis, and a missionary and Teen Challenge graduate from Toronto who both deal well with this kind of information on the people who are most hurt by using it. Would you please welcome John Diaktis and Chanel Harrett to Context Television. Help me welcome them.
Thank you.
Chanel, this is Brian O'Day. John, thank you for coming.
Hey, John.
Brian.
Great.
Well, you both heard the robust legal argument, Brian's experience argument. John, tell us the kind of clients you are seeing and their experience with marijuana.
Well, I've been working 5 years with adults, but I've worked 30 years with youth. So lots of experience around the marijuana issue when it comes to using and so on. The guys that come into our programs typically have, I would say, started with marijuana. Most of them have. I do know the statistics are 10% of the people who use marijuana get addicted, and that's a low number compared to many things.
Compared to alcohol, yeah.
But I do know from those who come to a program like mine who've been using them for a long time. I mean, I get guys who come to our program been using them for 30, 40, 50 years. And they started off with marijuana.
Okay, are you concerned about legalization, or do you think it's a good idea?
I think there's some good medicinal purposes that will come out.
Yeah.
But I am concerned because I do know, and I believe from working with youth for that long, that I believe that legalization is going to legitimize. And I think those kids who have been saying for years and years it's not harmful are going to see this as saying, see, I told you it's not harmful. And that's my concern about that. So I can see and I believe that those numbers are going to increase from youth using. We can talk about criminalization, all those things. We know that the marijuana on the streets is far different than what's going to be the medicinal marijuana. I think it's gotten, the THC levels have increased since the 70s.
Yeah, and Brian, as a former dealer, have the THC levels increased?
Yes, I mean,
So it's stronger, it's not your grandma's marijuana.
The only pot that's available today is strong marijuana. There's no weak marijuana available.
Okay.
When I was growing up, there was both.
Okay,
unless it's been cut. I mean, you know, on the streets, it gets cut differently in different times, and it depends what they buy at the time, which makes it even more dangerous because they're not sure what they're getting.
Okay, Chanel, thank you for coming and being with us because you have a very interesting story. Tell us your journey with marijuana.
Well, I came from a broken home, just a lot of emotional, mental abuse, that sort of thing. So I was really lost and hurting, and started going to school, hanging out with people that smoked marijuana, and it was peer pressure at first. Did it out of wanting to be accepted and that sort of thing, and then quickly it became like a numbing thing for me, and an escapism for me.
You actually couldn't control it in your life.
Yeah.
How did you break it?
How did I break it? I went to a program called Teen Challenge. I stopped right then and there as soon as I walked into the doors of Teen Challenge.
It's a flat-out Christian, no high like the Most High God place, right?
Yeah, that's
like
what I say all the time.
Okay, explain that to us. No high like the Most High God.
Yeah.
What happened to you at Teen Challenge when you met God?
Yeah.
Or did you meet God there? I should assume.
Yeah. So I went in not believing in God and was very angry, actually. And then God just wrecked me, grabbed a hold of my heart, and just became very real to me there, and actually started taking away all of, just replacing the hurt and stuff with His love. And there's no high like the Most High. I started realizing that marijuana is such a it's the opposite of what God wants to give us. And like, we're not meant to live numb and not deal with our issues and escape our issues, but we're meant to face them with Him, and that's who He created us to be.
We have been friends for a little while, and I want to play a clip, Brian, of your God story on marijuana. Take a look at another side of the God journey.
I'll start right from the beginning, from where I feel that my life took a turn from a normal person, from a regular little boy, and had a normal life just like probably most of you. I'm sitting in class, and in comes the brother. We were taught by the Christian brothers, and he walked in and he threw his books down on the desk. And as I was looking around, I heard, "O'Day." And I looked forward, and the brother said, "Come up here." And he said, "Hold them out." And I said, "Excuse me, brother?" He said, "Your hands, hold them out." When I turned him over, he reached inside his cassock and he pulled out a strap. And he hit me with this strap. And I got 16 shots. And I'm standing there and he's hitting me, and I'm in disbelief and fear. And I peed in my pants right there on the spot. And the brother said, "Get out of here. Don't come back until you can keep it together." And outside the classroom, there was a large radiator just outside the door. So I tucked myself in behind that radiator, and I was crying and sobbing and didn't know what to do. And around the corner comes this guy in his robes, and he looked at me. So he said, "Oh, come on, that's okay. Come on, I'll take care of you." And he put his arm around me, and he took me to his office. Turned out he was the principal. When I left that office about a half an hour later, I'd just been through my first sexual abuse by an adult. So I've taken that pile of dung that was my life and grew flowers from it. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how much it looks like a pile of dung that you are sitting on, it's absolutely the greatest potential ground for growing flowers.
Brian, that's one of the gutsiest stories. And where have you gone with your walk with God on that kind of history and the complications of drug addiction?
Most people get sober and they struggle with it. And I was just struck sober. I was struck sober on the 8th day of a coke run when I hadn't had any sleep, and I was just, killing myself, basically. And on the 8th day, I had a heart attack and ended up in hospital. That day, I'd smoked over 4 packs of cigarettes. I drank a bottle of whiskey, a couple of bottles of wine. And this was the 8th day of this type of behavior, and I probably snorted an ounce of coke. And I had to do every one of those lines. I had to do every one of those drinks. I had to do every one of those cigarettes because there was something there for me and that I needed to get. And it was a horrible way to have to get what I got. But what I got was I was dropped on the threshold of living and dying. And I was given a choice by some power greater than I to live or die. And if I chose living, I had to change everything about my life. So that's what I did. I chose living. And when I came to, the desire to use cocaine, the desire to smoke cigarettes, to smoke dope, to do anything to alter my perception was gone. It was completely lifted. It was a gift. Look, if I am the greatest power in my life, then I'm in big trouble. So through that lesson, I learned that I surely am not. I don't understand what God is in whole or even in part, but I know that I am not that, and yet that is. So.
Okay, thank you, all of you, for letting us go on the personal angle of this, because, I mean, it's going to be the Wild West, in my opinion, on marijuana. We're asking for new freedom. We're going to get it in Canada, and you've all told your personal and professional journeys. I'm
going to ride that horse in the Wild West out there with the lasso as soon as we get going, too. Okay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, Chanel Harrod is a missionary working in Toronto. She joined us with John DeActis, the Director of Mission Services at Quinton Warner House in London. And Brian O'Day is a former drug smuggler who is part of an education for all of us as Canadians. And we want to thank you all for being with us. If you go for a walk in my neighborhood, you'll find parents who put the kids to bed and sit out back and smoke a little reefer. And then when the kids are older, most parents I know are worried their kids are smoking. Youth I love have been tragically detoured by dope. I have a friend on medical marijuana, and in the past week, another offered me a joint recreationally. I get it. Weed is smoked by 10% of Canadians, but it seems like it's everywhere. Since marijuana always alters the mind, it's not a recreational option for my life as a follower of Jesus. God asks for sober-minded, self-controlled people. And God asks that we love each other. And that means harm reduction over a government's plan to legalize marijuana is also part of faith work. And that's why we asked the tough questions and explored it today. Should marijuana be legalized? In my opinion, only with a government monopoly on supply, limited hours and locations for sale, age restrictions, and good effort on risk education. We give ourselves a lot of freedoms. We also need to be aware of godly wisdom that can go along with that freedom. For all of us, I'm Lorna Dueck. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Jeff Grunwald, president of Media Voice Generation, the charitable organization that produces Context with Lorna Dueck. We strive to bring you news and current affairs stories from a Christian perspective.
The French people have given up on the option of the church and the option of God as being relevant in their lives.
The critical plight of refugees.
More than 3,000 people have been killed on the way to Europe only this year.
And the controversy around climate change.
And we've been operating as a global society on the premise that some people just have to be sacrificed if we want to have this kind of energy.
You can find us online with special features and commentary on our website, on our Facebook page, on Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm asking you to make a one-time gift or become a monthly supporter. Help ensure that we can continue to bring you more stories that reveal Christ and show God at work in the world. If you believe Context is worth every minute, then we need your support.